Hey y'all, today we have a Penn Slammer 35500 that's seen just one too many tarpon and finally blew up. So we lost the screw over here and some internals over here as well. So then it came in. So let's get started on it. I'm going to break this down, service it, and put it back together. I'm going to start with the handle. Just going to screw that by going backwards or counterclockwise. Now we can unscrew this to remove that pivot. That's simple enough. And I fully expect this reel to be somewhat dirty, or let's call it messy. This separates. And to get this off, I have a little divot tool here that I use. That's pretty loose, to remove this knob so we can access the inside of it. And then you have a screw inside that you just have to remove. And you definitely do want to do this, what I'm doing here, at least once, because you want to make sure that the bearings inside here are fine. And that's kind of why I'm doing it. So you have a bearing on the bottom, one on the top. So there's one more inside here. We're going to pop that out. I'm just going to double check them and then make sure that the area is secured in terms of protecting it against getting frozen in there. So all I'm going to do here is use a Q-tip, kind of wipe the inside where that bearing came from on the top. And the same for the bottom. And we're just going to check those, clean them off first. And then let's see what they sound like. Sounds fine. And that sounds fine as well. Alright, so I'm going to clean this stuff up, come right back to you guys, just here to put it all back together and what I would do to these things. Okay, so we got that all cleaned up. I'm going to start by oiling these bearings here. Kind of letting that sit. I'm going to grease right here. Kind of general area. Same thing for this shaft. And the grease that I'm using is the Penn blue grease. Some over that hole where the screw goes. And some inside here. And then we'll grease this entire thing, but especially the threads on that right there. Now the last thing we can grease here would be inside here where that first bearing sits, the one that's on the bottom, and also the one that's on the top, and those threads inside here where that piece is going to go. You can always double up and put grease on that thread, on the threads here as well. I'm not going to do that, but the first thing I'm going to start with is this, kind of like this. Drop this through the large hole. Just kind of lined it up to where this will go through, kind of like that. And we'll just screw it in place. Alright, so now we're going to drop one of the bearings on there. Kind of do a little spin on the way down. Kind of work that oil in. Stick our shaft on, just like so. Going to drop that in the hole. Then we're going to kind of position that so it falls over the shaft. Now you can use what I'm doing here, which is the tweezers, but you have to be very careful that you don't push down on the sides of the bearing and damage it. Alright, that's in place. Now I'm going to add a little bit of grease to the tip of this and then secure it. Now we can cover this up. You can hold it like this and then just turn the knob until you get to the bottom. And then you can tighten it with that. Don't over tighten it, but get it kind of snug. And while you're here, you can go ahead and grease the threads here that will be going inside the main gear, or you can wait till the end and do it. Next, we're going to go ahead and work on the spool. Just turn that knob counterclockwise to get it off. Pull straight up. We'll just set this to the side. Then go ahead and break this down. I'm going to break down the entire thing just to show you where everything is. And then same sort of deal in terms of cleaning it up. I'm going to use some Q-tips, paper towels, that toothbrush that you see me use so often, and that's probably about it. Maybe some corrosion X as well to break things down. Okay, so let's get started with the top part first. To open that up, we're going to remove those 3 screws. And that just pulls straight up. Alright, so under there you see that we have a seal. We're going to remove that as well. Just be careful when you do it. Sometimes these things will stick and you don't want to rip it off. You kind of want to work around kind of like this to gently lift that up. Just like so. And you saw the drag assembly came out. This is the top portion of it. We'll get those cleaned off in a sec. Lay this all out so you can see what it looks like. Kind of like that. Now I'm going to set this away, or set this to the side, and open this part up. The first thing we're going to remove here would be this clip on the side. By undoing this screw right here. Now we can lift that little clip there, or that spring up and kind of pull. So I raise it up slightly. Now I'm going to pull away from it to get it up. Now we can push that out kind of like so, and that's it. Next I'm going to do those 3 screws on the outside, these 3 larger screws. When you do these screws, you got to be careful that you don't strip them. So if you're using just a small micro tool like this and it's not working, you'll need to use something a little bit larger that has a little more power behind it, so you don't strip them. This generally does the trick, but it may not. So just be aware of that. Under those screws there's like a little washer. I'm going to kind of leave those alone for now. And now this just comes straight out. I'm going to pull it out with this so it kind of comes up. It didn't anyhow. You'll see a couple of seals here. There's one right here. Let's get this back up so you can see it. There's one right there that goes over a little post in the middle, and one on the outside here. Let's go ahead and pull this drag washer up and show you what that looks like. So that's the setup right there. We're going to take this off as well. That becomes a little tricky because it's not just tight quarters, that's all. But it's not super difficult. You can end up just leaving the one screw here I'm removing. You can leave that in there, but I'm going to take everything out. Alright, so to go ahead and get these things cleaned, because they look okay. This one should have a double, and I'll kind of show you how to go back in. This one I believe is probably fine. It just has a lot of gunk all over it, but we're going to see when we take it up, when we clean it off. I'm going to use brake cleaner fluid to clean that off. So I'm kind of just going to soak it for a little while. Don't get that in contact with these seals, clearly, because you'll disintegrate that stuff. So I'll get this cleaned up, come back to you guys, and show you how this goes back in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is the top portion of it. I'm going to grease this with Cal's drag grease or universal grease. I'm only putting a light coat on here. Just going to drop that in place. Then this goes. And I'm going to add some of that grease around here as well. Kind of around the outside of it, on that edge or lip. And that's because I'm going to put the seal on there versus putting it on here. Then we just have to rotate this to where we find the holes for the screws. Just pushing that down in place. Now I'm also going to take some grease and add to those holes right there where the screws are going to go in. Leave it there for now. Then I'm just going to drop it in place, kind of line that up. Looks about right. Then take our screws and put those in. Alright, I'm just going to wipe off the excess if you want to. I'm not necessarily a big believer in the adding grease to here, but if you are, simply take some of that grease, run around the edges. This way it acts as a seal when the drag knob is depressed. So that should be good enough. Kind of got it all in there like that. Okay, now we're going to kind of do the same thing for these drags. Notice the bottom one only has the drag washer on one side. I'm going to allow or let some of that residual grease get to the bottom here, so it helps protect it against corroding or sticking to that, to the housing or to the spool. Just going to drop that in. Just find the tabs and then just drop it in place. Then we're going to take this metal piece, and the way that's going to sit is those raised prongs right there will be facing up in this direction because they want to set in those little grooves on this plate. Drop that in. And of course we're going to grease both sides of this one. Same deal, we're just going to drop that inside the grooves or channels there. Now to put this back on, you'll notice that this little grommet or the seal has a channel inside that needs to fit over the corresponding section on this. I'm going to add some grease around it. Drop that in place. Then I'm going to kind of rotate that with my fingers until I feel it set down. Basically what you're going to do is line that up with the channel that goes through this metal piece. Kind of square it off like that. Now we'll put this seal on. And I'm going to add a light amount of grease in this channel right here also. Then just drop it over it. Just like that. Now notice I'm doing everything here before putting the extraneous pieces on, even though I took them off in a different fashion. Just going to drop that in place, just like that. Now we're going to take these screws, put those in. There's 3 screws. A good way of telling which screws will receive these 3 screws here is that you start with this section where that line keeper is and work across. That's where the first screw will go, then the other 2 will go there and there. These 2 screw holes will be for the clicker. And like I said before, there's a plastic washer under here I did not take off. I'm still not going to take it off. Before I do that, excuse me, we're going to add some grease to these holes as well. So we're going to take our Q-tip and just kind of work around for all those holes. Okay, so now for the clicker, it's going to be facing that direction inside, or looking like that. And we're going to take this screw, the spring. And if you notice, there's one larger hole and then one that's just broken. That broken piece will be going from the top inside that little channel right there. I'm going to add some grease to right here inside, just so these pieces can kind of stick together. Drop that in there like that. And now we're going to take our screw, kind of drop those through so it looks something like that. I'm not going to worry about that screw yet. And I'm going to kind of just stick that in kind of like that. Notice I added some grease to it. Turn it sideways and then just screw that in. Don't need to go all the way down. Just wanted to get it started in there so it's secured. Make sure it's over here before you tighten it all the way down. And now I'm going to take this screw, stick it through the hole, kind of pull that over and screw it in. Now we can tighten everything else down. Make sure it works, and it does. Now for the line keeper, we're going to take it and have it looking like it's straight up. That hole is straight up and down. Stick that inside the hole. Then we're going to take our spring, stick that in through the top side, and the way the spring is going to look is that gap will be obviously on top. That bend will be facing the line keeper. Whatever way works for you on this to get it in is fine. All you have to make sure is that that raised end is fitting up on top of this side. I know that might have been not the best explanation there. So I hope that kind of made sense. When it gets to that point, or when it gets in through the hole, I'm just taking a tweezers or my screwdriver and I'm pushing until I get it close to the hole where the screw is going to go. Then kind of working that down, just like that. Then we're going to take our screw and screw that in place. And there you go. Next we're going to do the rotor, and to access that or to pull it off, we're going to pull this up, get this piece off like so. Undo those 3 screws right there. And there's a seal under there. Just take note, sometimes it stays on the bottom, sometimes it gets stuck inside there. And we're going to remove this nut right here. Counterclockwise is the way to remove it. And you'll notice there's also another seal underneath that nut. This will leave for later on. Sometimes what happens is you'll see this little bushing pop out. I'm going to put that back on top just so we have it in place. That goes inside the pinion like that. Alright, so let's go ahead and pop that other seal out. As always, be careful when you do these things. And I'm going to undo the one screw that remained, which is on this side. Now what you'll notice here when I take this off is that we're missing the arm that fits inside that spring. I may end up replacing the spring as well. Don't know yet. But we can also remove this cover by doing this screw. Pulling out the spring. That trip arm right there. And that's it for that. This twists off to come off. We're going to do the line roller. When we take this apart, what you'll notice is I think there's a couple of bearings under here. So we have a washer here, or a collar that is supposed to come out. Sometimes what happens is it gets locked in there or frozen in there because all the salt gets inside of it. Next you have this washer that goes over it. And we have a bushing on this one, so this is the earlier style versus the latest version. Come on. The newer version is a different kind of a line roller, and there's two bearings, one on this side and one on this side. So you may see that instead. Alright, so same kind of deal, but getting this stuff cleaned up. I'll come right back to you guys in a sec. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is grease some places on here. One is right here, inside the hole, and definitely on top here, and those holes where the screws go. And also grease around this section, some inside here, some inside that hole where the screw goes, along the edge where the trip arm sits, and here where the bill spring sits, and some right here around the post and inside that hole. First thing I'm going to put together is the line roller. Light amount of grease just kind of around here, some on the hole where the screw goes. Stick the bushing on. I'll put it the way it came off, which is that side. Light amount of grease around it. Definitely going to grease inside this hole right here where the bushing is going to go. And if you want to know where it went, obviously whatever the cavity side is on, this side will be going towards the bail wire. So looking like that. Take our washer, kind of stick that over it. A little bit around this washer right here, or our collar. Some on the back side. Then we just stick that in between the washer right there, and we're set. Now we can go ahead and grease inside here and on that side. I'm going to stick our screw through after we add some grease to the tip of it. I'm not going to lock this all the way down yet, but I am going to get it started. Right about there is good. Maybe a little bit more. That's good. Now we can go ahead, and I'm going to use the same spring that came with it. I cleaned the grease off of that one, or whatever dirt was on there. I'm just going to grease this portion of it, as well as the tip. Just stick that in. Then we're going to lay that down in this hole right here. Before we do that, we're going to stick the trip arm in there, which is this section. That long part will be facing down or facing towards the bottom. A little bit of grease all around it. That should work. Make sure it's all the way on the top. Drop this in place, kind of like this. Have it looking just like that. We can definitely cover this up for the most part right now. So that's what we'll go ahead and do. And I like to leave it a little loose. I don't tighten it all the way down yet, but certainly I believe you probably can. I just want to make sure there's some room just in case I need to raise this up slightly as I'm pushing it in. Now that has some grease on top of it, so I'm not going to put any grease here, but I am going to put some on that tab and some inside that hole. Fit that hole over this just like so. Then we're going to push down at an angle, sort of, kind of going up over it. Kind of like that. And when you get there, make sure you're in the right spot. You can feel it when there's some resistance or the spring is engaging when you turn it, which it is. I'm going to secure it. Just so it doesn't fly up on me. Now I can rotate this around, kind of like so. Add a little bit of grease right inside that hole right there, and some around here. Pop that on, sideways, turn down, and you're good. And to secure that with our brand new screw. Now we can tighten all these things down. Now we're just double checking to make sure it works. I went pretty snug on that, and it does work, so we're good to go. Alright, now so we're going to start on the top side, or the body housing of the reel. We're going to do the pinion section. Remove these screws. Try and keep that intact right there. Sorry. Okay, so you'll see there's a trigger on top, which we're going to pull straight up. I'll break that down in a second, show you what's in there. Get this plate off. Nothing underneath. Sometimes that washer or that seal sticks inside, because that's kind of where it goes, around there. And we're just going to pull. Hopefully it comes straight up, which it does, and that's good. Now we can remove this by sticking a flathead screwdriver inside one of those gaps on that E-clip and kind of twisting to get it off. Get out. Now you can pull this straight up. You'll notice there's a wire underneath there. And this post will also come out. If it doesn't come, I'm not going to remove it. If it does, then we'll take it out. And I like to take this out once at the very least. Well, really only once, because I want to stick some grease inside there so it doesn't get corroded inside, because that had a tendency to get corroded inside there. If the shaft ever breaks or something happens where you need to replace it, you can't. There's a couple other things you can take off here that I will not take off. One is the ramp, so ramp combo sort of thing for the rotor brake. Those two screws will let you lift this plastic piece up right there, as well as this ramp for the trip, or for the bail trip. Next we're going to do the screws inside here, or on the side. There's 3 of them. And let's keep the screws separate. They're different lengths, but just in case. Now we can pull this off. Whew. First thing we can take out will be this. push this down so we can access that screw right there. Going to unscrew it. Pull the shaft out. Now we can pull the main gear out, the block, and then we have a screw to remove to take this Crosswind gear out. I think there's also something else under here. It's hiding. There's a bushing inside there we can remove as well. I think some of them, excuse me, I think some of them may actually have a bearing. I don't remember that part. But we're going to remove those bearings that are inside here for the main gear as well by removing these screws. And we'll do for both sides. Now we can pull that bearing out of there. And I'm only going to do this for this side, just to show you what it looks like. I think I'm going to leave that in there. As a matter of fact, I think I'll take it out. So I'll show you now, or in a sec. That seal I am going to leave in place. I'm just going to wipe it down to make sure there's no breaking or any damage to it. The reason being is because it's not always easy to get that seal back on. So if it's still intact, I kind of just leave it alone and let it be alright. We'll take this off for a reason, and I'll tell you as we put the reel back together why that is. Alright, so for this side, I'm going to show you what this breakdown is right here. Pull this out and this out. What you'll notice is you have a few pieces under here to kind of act as the seal. You have the seal there, you have this metal plate that kind of sits on top of it like that, then you have the bearing, and they all go together. Same thing for that side over there. It's kind of a messy situation here now, so I apologize in advance. I'm not going to clean anything up until we're done. So for this, that's the bearing stack. Set that aside, we don't need that. You have a bearing, the AR clutch, a collar or a bearing holder, and another bearing. For this piece, you have that seal on top, which will probably pop off. Happens. You have to kind of work it up. Kind of like so. And like I said, the seal might pop off, which it did. So the layout is that, then that. You have a spring underneath, which we'll take off as well, just so you can see it. The prong end faces upwards. Let's show you that in case I forget later on. That little prong end right there will be facing up towards the rotor. Then you have this that it all rests on, just like that. I think that's it. I told you about the bushing inside here. Let me remove it so you can see it. There it is. And that's it. Alright, get this all cleaned up, come back to you guys, and show you how to put it all back together. Okay, let's start with putting this back in. I'm going to add a light amount of grease inside here. When I say light, I mean real light. This dome will go in first. Notice the dome will be facing down, or that seal looking like that. Kind of push that in there a little bit. Don't be too aggressive with it. this piece, that recessed side will be facing down towards the seal there. Then this bearing will go inside on top of that. I'll push it just to make sure it gets down in there. Add some oil to it. Kind of just work that in with my finger a little bit. Then we're going to secure it with 3 screws. So let's go ahead and add some grease to these holes first. Because you definitely don't want this kind of getting stuck in there in case you need to replace that bearing. Guys, while I'm doing this, if you're appreciating the content, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. I'd appreciate it. And it'll be the same for the other side. Alright, now while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and add some grease kind of around there, some of that hole where the screws for the crosswind gear is going to go. Some inside right there. Holes for where the screws are going to go, and those tabs, as well as some around the seal that goes around the outside of it. It's kind of a light amount. And that should be good. Now we're going to work on the pinion first, or the pinion stack. So I'm going to grease inside here with a generous amount of grease. Even where that seal is going to go. Some right there. And definitely some around that hole right there where that post is going to go for the backup dog. So let's pull these pieces out. I think that's all we're probably going to need. Yeah. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to start with is this. For a double measure, I'm going to add some grease to the threads as well. Snug it down in there. Let's get some grease on the pinion gear. And for these gears, I kind of just lather it on a little bit. So a little more than I normally would for a lot of other reels. I just kind of found that they work better with a little bit more grease than normal. I don't know why, no, if you're asking. So now the first piece will go on will be that bearing right there. Add some oil to it. Work it in. And I'm going to just stick it in right now. It's not going to be set yet, but kind of keep it out of the way. Now we can stick this on, and you can do it one way or the other. You can just pop this piece out in the middle, if I can get it. Sometimes it's easier to do it this way. Drop the keyed portion on, stick it down in there, then put this on over it. Sometimes it works better. I want to make sure I grease, even though I greased inside that channel, I want to grease that as well. So that's why I took it back out. Alright, so now for this, I'm going to grease this as well. I know you guys can see the theme here. Grease. Oil. Just work that in. Drop it in place and then drop it in over it, just like that. Now the first thing we're going to do is take this seal right here, drop that in. There's a little channel or groove that this sits on. I'm going to make sure it's on there. It's on the outside, kind of like so. And if it doesn't work for you this way, you can always wrap it around this side right here, and I'll show you where it goes, because it's not going there for me. So I'm going to take it back out. If you look under here, notice there's two different sides, right? There's this like little serrated or whatever side. There's a kind of a solid side. That solid side will be facing down. This side will be facing up towards the rotor. A little bit of grease around the edge. Doesn't hurt to put it all around it as a matter of fact. And even some right there where it's going to be touching the bearing. Wrap that over, kind of like so. And that will fit perfectly on top of that. The way it's going to sit is looking, where's the dog going? Just like that. So looking just like that. The dog will be on top there. And let's get our screws. Now we just secure it. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and put this on. Just gonna, the way it's gonna sit is looking just like that. But first we're gonna stick the spring in, and the way the spring is gonna sit is that little short side will be going around the post looking like this, and on the outside just like you see right there, and that tall or longer with the bent end side will be looking like that. Hope you guys can see it. Now I'm just going to set this in facing out so it'll look like so, with that end facing out. Work this spring around it. There's a little channel or groove right here that you want to work that inside. And keep that kind of raised up because you want to get over that post or that ridge right there. Once you get over it, just kind of drop it in place. So now it's doesn't go all the way out when you pull it. And now we can take a little bit of oil just to drop it inside that hole. And I'm going to lock this down with some pliers. And now that's set. Now we're going to take this piece, we're going to grease it like we do for a lot of things. All around it. First piece we're going to stick on would be this. There's a little channel here on the bottom that this needs to ride in. And I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. Make sure we get it in the right place. There we go. So it's that little channel right there in the bottom, the lowest one, that spring is going to sit inside. Now I'm going to take this, kind of raise it over it. That little hole right there needs to receive the pronged end of that spring. The tricky part about this is that you have to spread this open to get it around. So getting that set over the spring is a little trickier. So you kind of got to line that up before you do it. So right around there is what it looks like. And if it doesn't work, which it did for me, then you got to try it again or just kind of maneuver it to how you get to where you get it inside there. Rest that down over it. Put that little channel right there over that notched piece on the dog. Then we can stick this ring either inside there or on the inside of the rotor. I'm going to stick it over here because I want that kind of around the outside. And I'll show you what that looks like after I'm done. Like so. Now at this point you can put the rotor on if you wanted to, and I think I may end up not doing that. Alright, so there are a couple of pieces I didn't show you. One is this washer that comes from under the Crosswind gear, and there was something else, I can't remember what it was. Oh, there was washers on the main gear that I didn't show you as well. Alright, so I'm going to stick this on just to make sure it's on there. I add some grease inside that hole. This way we just don't forget it. And now I'm going to grease the crosswind and the main gear. Then I grease the entire thing. Around that post I add a little more than I would elsewhere.
Just like a little extra heating of it. That looks pretty good.
Notice I'm putting some grease inside that hole where the handle's going to go. Alright, so first thing is I'm going to put this on, and that's so we don't forget it. Stick the bushing inside, then drop this and screw it on. Now we can take our gear, our main gear, excuse me. Leave that out for a second. Now we can take our crosswind block, add a decent smattering of grease inside there, and then just kind of lightly grease the rest of the surface area on there. That looks pretty good. Drop that on. Now the way it's going to sit is like that. We're going to have to work this post in. So let's kind of do them together. I'll put it in like that. At an angle, stick this under that plate right there. And then just drop it in place looking like that. Pull it all the way down to the bottom. Stick in our main gear, and then we're going to stick our post in. Before we do the post, we're going to add some grease around there where it's going to sit inside the block, and we'll do some now at the top here where that drag knob is going to go. Drop that down straight through there, and it goes either way. It's either side, or either flat side will go inside the block. Now we're just going to secure it with this one screw. Alright, now that's set. Now we can take this side, put our two washers on there. And I'm going to do a little bit of testing here when I go through this, so you have to bear with me a little bit. Just want to make sure the feel is right. That's all I'm doing. So cover that up, and then we're going to screw this in. And it feels good. One additional step I'm going to take here is I'm going to grease these screws. And that's because I don't want them getting locked inside there either. Two things that are worse, right? You can't open the, either replace the bearing or you can't remove the screws, and you need to get inside the reel and you can't remove the screws. And let's feel this again, see how it feels. Still feels good. So one trick here, or note I want to make, is whenever you're putting these very sealed reels back together, you always want to take this cap off. And the reason you do that is because a lot of air can get trapped in there and essentially push that main gear higher than it should be. So it just feels off. So now since everything's put back together, I can go ahead and put that on. Let's stick the rotor on now. Make sure that's set all the way back. Drop this down, find the keyed section for it, which we'll find in a sec. Take our washer, our seal, stick that back in place. Screw it in. That side will be going down, obviously the one with the threads. And you kind of want to line those up where, I think it's the flat side of the point. I think it's the point actually, I take that back. Let's find out where those points are lined up with the screw holes. But let's see if that's true. Yeah, the points. Okay, so next thing is to put this in, this seal. The way that seal is going to sit is there's a little bump at the top. That bump or domed portion of it will be facing up towards the rotor. I'm seeing towards the spool, kind of like that. You can add some grease inside here if you wanted to, just like an extra precautionary thing. And then we're just gonna secure this. All right, let's see how it feels. Still feels good. That's good. Now we'll take our washer. Metal washer goes first, then these two plastic washer. The thicker one goes on the bottom. Any thinner ones that you have will go on top or above that. You may have more than one. This one only has one. Then we put our click gear on, just like so. Then we'll stick our spool on there. And now, add the drag knob, and we'll test this reel out when we put the handle in. Nasty drag. Oh, the drag is tight. All right, let's feel that. Feels good. Bail flip works nicely. All right, guys, thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you appreciated the video. Consider subscribing to the channel if you appreciate content like this, and I will see you all next time.